Greetings and welcome to CS195 Web Development Week 2 HTML Basic Tags. This lesson, HTML images. So with this lesson, we are going to learn a few new tricks about HTML. So there are important pieces to understand in this that will be applied to the rest. Of course, all the basics of closing and opening tags and all that, but there are some pieces. But before that, if you remember our last lesson, we did list, and now that introduced the concept of having more than one tag to make an element. So with that, what was a tag for the ordered list? Ordered list. Type it, say it out loud. Hopefully, it should go with OL, right? So the ordered list, the opposite one you can use is the unordered list, which was a UL. That was the outer tag that you put around all the list items, which was the LI tags, and you used those tags as many items as you needed. One UL, OL tag set to wrap around everything, and then LI tags as needed thing. But today's lesson, our objective is to understand how to add an image to a web page using an external website link. We will also cover how to use an internal one, because you will need to know how to use that for the rest of the assignments and projects and when you use 00 web host. But for now, the video we're going to watch, kind of how we're explaining this, we're going to go ahead and go over and expect you to make sure that you can add it to an external website. And in a lesson, you'll have your con challenge to make sure you can show that you can do this. But our success criteria, students will just demonstrate adding an image with the correct attributes into the correct location into the HTML code. A couple key pieces in this one is that correct attributes. The correct location is still where it's at, but the correct attributes, we'll learn what attributes are. This is the new concept we're going to go over. So as we watch the video, we need to pay attention to what they're talking about, what is an attribute and how does it work, because this will be used throughout the rest of it, and other attributes we're going to use are needed to get JavaScript to work. Not even make JavaScript a lot easier. So with that, let's go ahead and watch the Code Khan Academy video, and then again we'll pause as we go through this. But again, follow along, make sure you're on the Trinket site, we'll watch the video, and then we'll go ahead and try this out together.
We've been talking about rabbits this whole time, describing them with paragraphs and lists, but we could just put a picture on our web page and actually show what a rabbit looks like. Well, to insert a picture in a web page, we use the Img tag, which, as you might guess, stands for image. If we just type image, though, we don't see anything. Why not? Well,
all right, so let's notice that to do the image tag, we use img. All right, so the image tag is img. You also notice she is saying we don't see anything, and this is where you need to understand how HTML works, right? So this H1 all about rabbits, currently how I have mine set, depending, you might have different scrolls right now, but all about rabbits is an H1. I don't see all about rabbits on here, so we scroll up. This looks more like an H1. This is an H3, so it's smaller. Why rabbits make great pets? Why rabbit? So again, as you start doing HTML, you should start making these connections, and that's how I knew that I wasn't in the right spot. So even if it did show up, I wouldn't have seen it because it would have been up here. But this image, look, H1, H3, H1, H3, this image should show up right here, but it does not. And again, this is where she's going to start going into the attributes, because the tag by itself just, this is the image tag, but it doesn't say, it's missing a bunch of information that I want you to think about. What is it missing right now? I mean, if we have the image, what else would it need to know? Say it out loud, type it in the chat box, whatever, write it down. Hopefully you're thinking, what image, right? What image are we going to put there? So it's missing what the image is. So we're going to see how you tell it that. And it's a thing called an attribute.
We didn't tell the browser which image to show. There are millions of images on the internet, and we certainly don't want it to pick a random one, because it might be something gross that we don't like. And it also just won't be what we want it to be of. We need to tell it the URL of the image. The URL is what shows up at the top of browsers in the address bar. And that's what it is, an address. It's a way of finding some resource on the web. And it means that we can only insert an image if it's already on the internet somewhere. We can't just insert images that are only on our computer. There are many ways to find images on the internet, but we're making it easier for you here by providing an image picker and a photo collection.
All right, so I'm going to pause this right here because this is an important concept to understand with a few things that she just said. One, this is important for when you're doing your challenges. When you create a picture for this, the way I'm going to teach you, you can't necessarily do that. I believe there's a way, if you use Wikipedia, you can use images on Wikipedia and do what I'm telling you. But just realize for their challenge, they're going to limit what you can actually select. So it's kind of nice in the fact that, it's just going to come up with a image picker and you pick the image that you want, but it doesn't give you a lot of options. Now, that being said, she also pointed out that you can't just have a photo on your computer. You can't point to a photo on your computer. Now, if you remember back from our 00 web host information or any other web server you might be using, that's technically a computer, but you still need that image on that computer. So you need the image either on the internet or located on the server, the computer that has your web page. So these are things you need to understand about how it works. And again, I'll show you what this means in a little bit, but either it needs to be on the internet. And really, if you have a web server that has a web page that's on the internet, as soon as you upload that photo, it's technically already on the internet. People can find that image. It's on the internet, even if you don't actually have it on a web page. So that's important. So really, technically, it needs to be on the internet to be seen. But we're getting technicalities. What I really want to show you is she's going to show you how a URL works, where you basically get it from a web page. I'll show you another way, because she's going to show you the picker. So this only works. What she's going to show you only works in Khan Academy. I'm going to show you what she's talking about, what gives you more freedom. But then I'm also going to show you how you do it for a web page. So watch what she's going to do. She's going to, because you need to know this when you do the challenge, you're going to need to be able to use the picker. And it's still technically a photo. What she's doing is just adding one little step that you're not normally going to do, but once she's done, it's still correct.
To get that to pop up, we need to add an attribute to our image tag. An attribute is an additional bit of information about a tag, and this is the first attribute that we've seen.
You probably want to write that down in your notes. Keep that seared in your brain. It's a vocab word. An attribute is information about a tag. Right? We talked about the head being information about the HTML. The body is what shows up. But an attribute is something about the tag. So in this case, that something is where the image is.
So to tell the browser the URL, we're going to add an attribute with the name source. We'll add a space and then type src.
All right. So again, this is key. I'm going to point this out now. She's going to point it out. I'll point it out again later. Notice that's actually inside of this. It's inside of those angle brackets, the greater and less than. It's not on. If you put it on this side, src, it's going to show up. It needs to be inside of this actual one. And it's always inside of the first tag. Now, hopefully, me saying that's inside of the first tag, some of you popped up and said, wait a second, there's no closing image tag. That's right. Remember, my rule of thumb is if there's something inside of it, that's when it has an open and close. If there's just a BR tag, which apparently they don't have one around here, but if there's just a BR, a break right here, there's nothing inside of it. It doesn't surround something. It's not surrounding anything. So if it doesn't surround anything, the image just is. It will just show up here when it's done. It doesn't need an ending tag.
Now, it stands for source, but it's very important that you spell it src because the browser will ignore it if we misspell it. Now I need to put an equals.
Which we'll see that in a little bit, because besides not putting this in the right spot or using the wrong one as we get to links later, people can confuse it, students can confuse it, but the number one thing I see really is SCR. I see that all the time. It's not SCR, it's SRC.
Sign so that I can tell the browser what the attribute value is. And now I'll add a quote and...
All right, so this right here is basically the syntax. Remember, syntax is how you type the code, how you make it work and look right so it recognizes it. It's always that. So attribute equals quotes, and luckily it closes it for you. Doesn't matter if you're using, some of these are real, some of these are fake. This is fake, this is a real attribute, but it's always attribute equals quotes. An attribute being, don't literally type the word attribute, whatever it is, source, ID, height, width, there's all kinds of attributes. Attribute equals quotes, because that's another one I see. People will forget the equal sign, people will not put the quotes, and sometimes that works, but I mean, just always attribute equals quotes. That is what you want. You'll also notice that as soon as she typed that in, it popped this up, and this is what I'm talking. This is specific to her thing. So it gives you a photo, and then notice that this code right here, when we go and pick ours, this is the same code, right? It just gave you this file picker, and it won't let you put anything else in there, really. Again, there's an exception, I believe they have down here somewhere that tells you can use Wikipedia instead. But at the end of the day, when you're doing it here, it's going to have that pocket picker. Normally it's not. You have to go find it, which I'll show you later, and then you just paste in the URL there. So with that reminder, attribute equals quotes, and then you're going to type in what you want to be the source inside those quotes.
The editor will autocomplete the end quote. So attribute values are always wrapped in two quotes. Okay, so normally this is when we'd start typing our URL, but here on Khan Academy, that's when our image picker will pop up. We'll just pick image, and I want a picture of a rabbit, so I'll click the Animals tab and select the adorable rabbit and click OK. Do you see how there's a URL inside our quotes now? And do you see how that URL starts with HTTP? That's how we know it's pointing at some image somewhere on the internet. And hey, look, there's a bunny on my webpage. But what if the server hosting the image was failing and the browser couldn't load the image? How will the viewer know what my amazing image was of? They'll see nothing and wonder for the rest of their lives what they missed out on. That's why image tags have another attribute, alt, which we use to tell browsers what the alternate text for an image is. So to add another attribute, we just put a space after the final quote for the last one. Then we type ALT equals quotes. And inside these quotes, the text will be...
Again, recognize that thing. Attribute equals quotes.
Some helpful description of the image, like rabbit with lop ears in barn.
So what she's saying is, for whatever reason this picture doesn't work, it's broken, deleted, whatever, this will show up with this. Now I can do it like here again. If I put a 2 here, it's broken, right? This photo doesn't exist. This exists, but this photo doesn't exist. And again, this is the key piece of, that's the name of the file, which will be important later when we actually show you how to add a photo, because all of this, they're just pointing to a picture on the photo, but once we actually realize that, hey, what it's really looking for is this, they're just giving us the path to it, we'll understand that, we can create our own path. But anyway, look up here, rabbit with lop ears. That's what this is. If there's no alt here, then it's just the blank thing. So it gives that written thing. Now, she's going to talk about this, but I want to put my 2 cents in too. There's another reason for this. If someone is blind, they can actually use basically a text reader to read that. So it'll say title, all about rabbits, picture, rabbit with lop ears, and it'll just kind of read the web page to them. Now again, why would a blind person do this? well, because it reads it to them, so they just need to be able to. If there was a link, it'll say here's a link, and they can kind of click around for it. And a lot of them, they're not completely blind. They just really they can't read it, but they can kind of see the blurs of where it is. So it'll explain it to it. So I want to point that out for a couple of reasons. One, not only is it the right thing to do to really explain what that photo is for someone who can't see it, but if you go into business, and this is what this is all about, right? We're teaching you how to build and design web pages. If you go into business, this is required by law. So again, she'll go over what I just kind of said, but she doesn't point out that if you go into business, it's required by law to put this into it. So with that, again, attribute equals quotes, and then whatever you want it to be goes inside the quotes.
That also helps people who see web pages but can't really see them, like the blind. They use an app called a screen reader, which will literally read a web page to them, describing each tag it sees. When it sees an image tag, it'll read off the alt text, since a blind person can't see images. So you should always use alt text so that the whole world can experience your web page. Okay, back to the image we can see. It's a little big. Let's resize it. We can do that with more attributes, with our width or height. So let's say width equals 100. Okay, so now it's 100 pixels wide.
All right, I'm going to show you another feature that doesn't really happen in the real world. She's going to mention this little slider. That's what she's talking about. There's a little slider that when you have the ability to do that and you see a slider up there, that's what the slider lets you do. In most of the programming things I've ever used, that doesn't exist. So realize you can use that in Khan Academy, but it doesn't actually exist really anywhere else that I know of.
That's a little too small. Let's put our cursor inside and use the number scrubber to make it bigger.
I call it a slider.
That looks a lot better. Now let's try adding height. Let's say height equals 50. Uh-oh, I squashed my bunny. Poor bunny. See, that's why I should usually only specify either width or height. But
all right, so that's pretty much, she's going to end up talking a little bit more about that. But at the end of the day, really pick one or the other. You can height or width, otherwise, because it automatically picks the height for you. When you change the width, it automatically picks the height. Same concept. If you had height instead of width, it'll automatically pick it for you. So just, unless you absolutely need to, don't do width and height, because it'll automatically, if you want it to stay symmetrical and the way it looks, you just go ahead and just pick one of those. It'll fix the other one for you. Otherwise, again, you can easily get that squish bunny or squish photo and things. So with that, these are the pieces of it. Again, we attribute is something about that tag. Some tags really require attributes to do anything. An image tag does nothing without its attributes. Some of them, like if I wanted to give this an ID, I just give it an ID. So I gave an ID of me. And worry about that thing later. Oh, that's why the H1 went away. So ID equals me, but again, also notice it's in the first tag. So this is the first tag, and it's inside of it. Now, as we go through Trinket, I'm going to show you some tricks to help you remember and see it better. But the attribute goes inside of it, and H1 doesn't necessarily need this unless it does, which as we go further into CSS and go into JavaScript, we'll see how useful the ID is and what it is and how it works. But just realize that these are attributes and you need them. So let's head on back to Trinket. And again, your goal is your success criteria is to be able to make this image tag and have an image show up and have all of those correct attributes. So let's go on to line 6. We'll hit tab. And if you remember, again, I'm going to full screen this and enlarge it for you. If you remember the image tag, what is it? You can say it out loud. What's the image tag? Img, right? Img. So we just go and create it. We notice nothing shows up, which is expected because we have to use our attributes. So here is what I almost always do, especially when we're going to do some pasting and stuff, because you just never know what you're going to get. I always do source equals quotes, and then go outside the quotes, space, alt equals quotes, outside of it, width equals quotes. And I just do all three of those right away, because sometimes this source, and we might well see that today, this source could be, I mean, an arm's length of code. And you think I'm joking, but I mean, you might run a copy a picture and all of a sudden you're like, where'd this half go? Also, and I see this all the time, is there just becomes, students will not finish everything, and then they'll have, like I said, just tons of gibberish in their thing, a really, really long URL. And then they're like, why do I have an X here? Like, I have the source, I have the alt, I have the width. Why do I have this? And it's because you don't have this. So that's why it's important to just do the whole entire tag like this. Done and done. I have everything I need. I can start filling out that tag. Now, to get the source, we're going to look at a couple different things. So I'm going to get out of the full screen real quick. I've already done my search. I just searched for a fuzzy bunny. A lot of the times you'll probably need to actually click on images, but I already have some images and found the image I want, so I'm going to click on this. Now, here is the key from getting it from the internet. Right click, and this should work for all the different browsers. Right click on it, copy image address. And I believe it says that for every, it might be in a different location, but I believe it says that for every single browser. Copy image address. Don't copy link address. Don't copy image. Copy image address. You'll see when we go back to this and we click inside the quotes, and I'm going to control V, but you can right click, paste. And luckily this one does have a realistic one. So sometimes, again, you might be like scrolling. This one has a reasonable one, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of show you that. The other option, which I've already done. Now, if you want to upload the photo, and we have copyright things, so there's a lesson on copyright. If you want to publish stuff, there's a whole rule on this. So if you want to upload something, let's put it this way: if you want to upload something to 00 Webhost, before you upload anything, you need to make sure that you look at the copyright one. But for just the trinket, you just want to see if it works. You could also, and again, if you follow all the standards, you can save image as. And this might say something different in different browsers, but the bottom line is you save the image as, that'll download it, down to your downloads. And I already did. I downloaded it. So it's in my downloads, called Fuzzy Bunny. And we'll need that because, again, you have to upload that to the thing. Now, in Trinket, we're going to special way. I showed you how to do this. If you go back to the lesson in 00 Webhost on how to add files, I showed you how to upload a file to it. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and full screen this again. We have the photo, right? And I'm going to scroll this over so we can see more of it. But again, you can see the URL. It's really long. This is the actual file name of it. Now this is where I do cute, evil, fuzzy bunny as the name. And then I can change the width. If I just want a little one, 50. And I like, it's pixels. For standardization, I like putting the PX there. You don't have to, as you notice, but it's good practice because sometimes you do. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you is because sometimes it works, but there are a few times that if you forget that, it won't work. So I prefer that you go ahead and do 50 pixels because that's what it is, and that's the correct way to do it. Now, what about uploading it? If you need to do in Trinket because you want to in Trinket, but the code's going to show you something. This is what I want to show you important about the code. That you add to image library, you upload it. Mine's already uploaded, so upload image, you find it, you upload it. I don't need to do it, so I'm going to go back here. Now, the key is knowing what the name of that file was, right? That is the key to what we're doing right here. So fuzzybunny.jpg did not work, right? Fuzzy bunny, and I think that's because I actually need to, there you go. So you do need to click on when you upload, or if you already have some other ones, you need to click on it, it'll show up. But again, you have to pay attention to this. If I just typed in fuzzy bunny, doesn't work. I need another thing I see a lot with students is they typed in PNG. It's not a PNG. This one happens to be a JPEG. So again, make sure you understand the file type. But this is pointing to the actual file system. So this file is on the same server. Now, what I recommended, if you remember, which is, this is going to break it, but pix slash. So basically you have this index.html file, and then they're in that folder, they'll have the, so if you look, remember what it looks like, the index.html, and then this will be a folder called pix, and maybe you have an about.html. We'll pretend that these are all what you have, and you can double click on pix and it'll take you to the folder. This fuzzy bunny would be inside of that folder. So this is how you do all three of them. If you have it directly, you just want to point to a web page. This is the whole web page, right? So this is pointing to another web page. This is not on your web page. So if they delete it, you don't have access to this. If they delete it, you don't have access. This one right here, how this is, again, if it doesn't have that HTTPS : / in front of it, if it doesn't have that, it's going to look, and this is important when we get to another lesson, if it doesn't have that, it's going to look for the file on your web server. So again, remember 00 web host, how that works. Again, if you're trying to be organized, you'd be pix / because then it says, all right, look for this inside of the pix folder. So those are important things to remember on how to add an image. But in summary, it's the image tag. You add attributes inside of. The attributes go inside of it, inside of the image tag. And you still have to close it. And the attributes are attribute equals quotes. Attribute equals quotes. So if you can remember those pieces, then you're good to go. There is, of course, just going over here and say HTML images. All right, so hopefully you've had a Google searching thing, some kind of practice on it. And we go, blah, 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 and look. There you go. In this case, they didn't use the width, but what's nice if you end up with W3 schools, you might not always there, but this try it yourself thing is kind of cool. And now you do see it does have the width and the height. So you can change stuff around. Remember, height doesn't, you don't need to put that there. If I would have left that there, and then I'm like, oh, you know what? It's not wide enough. Or it's too wide. Let's change it to Let's change it to 300. And I run this. Again, this is why she says only ever do one. It'll automatically fix everything for you. So, good prime example of how you can use Google to help you find what you need. I don't expect you to memorize all of these tags. You should be able to find them, but you do need to know, how this works. They actually have this picture somewhere. This picture is in this folder, inside of the HTML folder. This picture exists. So yeah, that's something to understand when you're working with this. So with that, we do have a practice, we do have a challenge, and if you need a little bit more help, there is another video to watch, and then we'll finalize it off with a journal entry for your assignments. Have a great day. We'll see you next lesson.